So, we're gonna talk to each other. I'm gonna ask you like your name, and then I'm gonna ask you questions, and then just feel free to just talk, tell stories when
And
you're,
I can
and
start
just
like when I was a teenager and
yeah, just talk to me. Don't worry about the camera, okay? Just a conversation between me and you.
okay.
So, what's your name and
Joe Busey, they call me Joe, and in the service they call me Little Joe. So when I was a young teenager, I was interested in making model airplanes, and I made a P-38 fighter plane. You never heard this, and it was like a 3-foot wingspan. And my dad had it hanging in the corner. I bet you for years you couldn't even dust it because the dust stayed on the paper. And then when I became eligible for draft, he suggested that if I sign up, I can choose where I wanted to go. If I was drafted, they tell me where to go. And I don't know if you knew that, but
no? I never knew
so I picked they were having cadets for flying. I was interested in it. When I went in and signed up, they gave me an extra month to stay home. I signed up on April the 3rd, my birthday, and then they told me I'd come back. And it was a month later, May 5th, they called me to come in. And I went back right to the barracks, and they gave me a bucket and a sponge. We were supposed to clean the floor in our clothes that we got there. They didn't give us any work clothes or anything. But the next day, they gave us the uniforms, and they sent all our clothes home. And then they sent us the basic training and learn how to march with the group and physical training through, where'd we go? We went to Tyndallville, Florida. That's one of our basic trainings. Then we went to Boxy, Mississippi, some more. Then they decided we had to take tests for being a cadet, but didn't know you had to go through college to answer all those questions. Some of the words I couldn't even pronounce. So that then he decided I was good for maybe gunnery school, and that's where they sent me to gunnery school. It was very interesting. I never was fired a gun in my life. The first time we went out, they gave us a truck with a flatbed on it. What we done was shoot at these clay pigeons that they would shoot out. We went through a maze on the back of the truck. There was three of us. Two were enlisted men and a trainer, instructor. And he was showing us how to shoot. It was mounted on the back of the truck. So it was real easy, like it was a shotgun. And as we went through a maze, there was a marker for the guy that was in the little hut to know when to shoot the clay pigeon, because they wouldn't. We didn't know where they were, and they didn't want to shoot at us because they were shooting in another direction. So I was pretty good with the first one, but happened to be I was on the truck with a gun went on the fritz. So they gave us one with a shotgun for your shoulder.
Yeah.
And they didn't tell me how to use it. I never used one before. So the first one I shot the clay pigeon, but it knocked me on my can. And they were laughing because, two guys, they weren't laughing, they were like smiling. They thought it was funny. I didn't, because it hurt my shoulder. So he showed me how to use a shotgun. It was a rifle that shoots those pellets so you can hit the clay pigeon. So we went through that maze. It was interesting. It was a lot of fun. A couple of days of that, and we had our chance to go into those boxes to shoot for the other guys, just to know what we went through. And as soon as we seen the truck pass a certain point, we would shoot it. We wouldn't see the truck after because we were shooting in another direction, because we didn't want to be shooting at them. Okay, that was fun. Then the other training, we went in the B-24s, and we used a side window to shoot at the sleeve of a fighter plane, pulling its sleeve. So you have to aim at the sleeve. You can't aim it right at the sleeve. You have to aim in front of it because the bullets, they curve. Yeah, because the wind is blowing, like, you know. And if you don't lead it so many rads, what they call rads, there were little circles on our gun that there's like 3 circles on it. So you aim at the third one, and so the bullets will go into the flag. But pilots that that carried them were the ones that screwed up. They were fighter pilots, because that's kind of spooky, because a lot of the guys shut down the flag. They hit the cable, and they couldn't get it. Our bullets were colored, like they knew who was hitting the flag. Like when they got the flag, they could see the colors in the flag. So evidently, I must have did pretty good, because that's what they trained me for. Not knowing all the stuff we were doing was in the dark. They showed us how to take the gun apart. There's like 6 parts in it. And if it jammed up on you, you didn't want to sit there and let them shoot at you. You try to repair it. And that's what they trained us in a dark room. And then they would show us different planes on the screen in this dark room, so that we knew the difference between American planes and German planes. And every once in a while they'd show up a girl with the breast sticking out, like real quick. Everybody got a giggle. But then the 50 caliber was on a jam. They fixed it so it would jam on us, and it's dark. You can't see your face in front of you, and you have to reach down. I had 2 of them, but the one on the right, you had to take it apart and try to put it back together again, which worked. They trained us how to put the 50 calibers in the chain link thing, so it would go through the mechanism through the gun, and if it would jam, like, we knew where it would be, so that would help us. Because, like I said, you don't want to sit there and you had a chance of fixing the plane, the bullets, and I think I would say that my first, we were on a practice mission. I was sitting at the window on the side of the plane. This was a practice mission, not knowing it wasn't our pilot that was flying. I looked out the window. The wing was almost touching the ground. When we were taking off, I couldn't see the runway. Looking at it, something's wrong. Later that day, we found out it was an instructor teaching a woman how to take off with a bomber. I said, that could have been one of my days, unlucky days. You follow? We could have been a Frisbee, or the wing would have flew off if we'd hit something. When you look out the window, you can't see no runway. There's something wrong, right?
Yeah.
That was one of the days I might not have made it. But there was 3 altogether. The other time we were flying on a mission, and we had to fly high altitude, and we had to use oxygen, a mask, oxygen, and all of a sudden I was breathing. I said something was wrong, like not knowing that my hose from my mask slipped out of the oxygen fuel from the plane. So when I turned my head, that they whipped around. I said, "Oh, you know, it was my fault. Maybe I didn't tighten it up, because it clicks when you put the hose into it." And it took me almost half an hour to recover, because I lost all my oxygen, and I didn't report it because I said I didn't want to lose my job, because it'd be stupid that I didn't make sure it was connected right. That was another time. But the other mission, we were coming back. I think it was the 3rd mission, we were coming back, and I spotted a silhouette of a German Messerschmitt. And we have a throat mic that we talk to anybody in the plane, okay? But at the same time, the top turret kind of seen the plane, the silhouette, because it was nighttime. And we couldn't get back to the pilot because it interfered. So the captain told the co-pilot, right above him is where the top turret is, pulled his pants leg and said, "Little Joe, let him talk." And then I told him it was like 6 o'clock high. It was closer to 7, but if you looked over there, you can see in that area. But when everybody looked there, the plane wasn't there. Now, I was lucky because the top turret seen it, and I seen it. Now, if I was the only one, I said, "Oh, little Joe needs his glasses changed, you know, or he needs little glasses." And I could have got in a lot of trouble because nobody seen it but me. But I was glad that he seen it too. And what the pilot did when I told him where it was, we're coming over the bay to England, that he went so low that the props from over the lake, I guess it's a bay, the props whipped up some of the water, and I could see it on my windshield, and some came in my turret, because that's how close we were to the water. The reason he went so low, because when the plane attacks you, he starts up high and he glides into, and he couldn't do that because the water was too close. You follow me? Mm-hmm. And then he had to pull away, and that's why nobody else seen him. Because if he was right behind us, he has all those guns, but the nose gun is the only one that couldn't reach him. All the guns we had, like the top turret, the 2 side gunners, and the ball gunner, and me, they had like 2, 4, 6, 8 guns facing him where he only had 2. So I imagine he must have knew about it. That's why he pulled away. But that was the exciting ones. That was a close one too. So what else can I say?
So I'll just ask some questions. They might spark some memories. We'll go back to your basic training. What did it? I mean, you told me a little bit about the guns that you were on the back of the flatbed and you were shooting it, and also you did the whole in the dark building and rebuilding the guns. But do you have anything else that you remember from?
Well, my marks must have been pretty good because there's only a certain amount of people were selected, and evidently they had to pass. You had to do so much that was right. Now, if you're shooting at something else and you couldn't see, they know by watching them. That's why they had only 2 people on the flatbed, and the instructor knew who to pick. And I guess he gave them the okay that I was one of the better ones that could see. But well, like I said, we had our chance of doing the same thing that the other guys. And we switched, and they did the same thing we did. We did that about maybe 3 or 4 times a week until I think I would say that we were in Georgia. The weather in Georgia was getting bad, and we needed so many flying hours to train to get overseas. So we went to Cuba for 3 days, and we flew the 3 days for enough hours, and we came back. And then we went all the way to New York. We got all our things together, and then they put us on a boat, and it took us 6 days to get over to England because of the U-boats that are floating around in the water. And they showed us on film, if a guy was smoking on deck, how far a plane could see a little light. And if you're in a boat and a plane could see that direction, by the time he got there, he could see the boat, right? And it would be in that area because a boat can't disappear that quick. Mm-hmm. But the plane can get there real quick. It was interesting. So, everybody got instruction, nobody on deck at nighttime, and no smoking. I know on the bottom of the boat, they had a lot of Marines in there going over. But our officers had staterooms, and we were in a place where we had 30, 40 guys on hammocks sleeping, and I was one of them. But our captain invited us up in their stateroom to take a shower. Taking a shower in those boats, the soap wouldn't give you any lather, and you're trying to clean yourself and they had a certain kind of soap that it'll clean you, but you can't tell on account of no lather. And it was interesting that they gave us that. but the other ones were like the other guys taking showers. They were in like a bunch of in a certain room, like. So we had it pretty nice going up there. They invited us, you know. Then we had our tin cans, our cans for canteen that would go for your dinner, like, and they would fill it up and go and find a place to sit down to eat. 6 days of that, you know.
So they just gave you like you had your like your can, so they just filled it up with like soup, and that was your dinner. And
No, we had one of those trays, like had different compartments, and we would they would have different stuff in it. They would fill it up and get in line, you know, and go someplace to sit down and eat, like. And the other can was like for coffee or tea. So had a lot of milk we can had too. And on the way back, when the war was over, they had trips to see what damage they did to Germany, and they had some pictures. Maybe you've seen them before. And I didn't get a chance to go, but they filled it up with. They filled my plane up with dignitaries to go over, and we weren't allowed to go because they didn't need a gunnery then. And I know one guy stopped. They stopped in I forget what county. They brought me their money, and they knew I played in the accordion when I was little. I had a little orchestra with my brothers, and they found me one of those little concertinas. Like they bought it for me. I think I still have one down in the basement. I have to maybe dig it out, and I just put it in the cupboard and left it there. Like I said, they knew that I was in the orchestra, and it was interesting. In time, we had 3-day passes to go to London. They took me to the older guys, the ones that were married, and they know that I never went to a burlesque show, and they took me to one of them. And it wasn't very interesting.
No, you didn't like it.
There was a girl up in a cage. The light would come on real quick and shut off, and she's sitting in the cage with big feathers. It's burlesque. I didn't understand.
So when you so where did the boat take you to? Like whenever you were leaving the U.S. and
from New Jersey, New York, we went to zigzag across the Atlantic to I don't remember the port, and they shipped us to Kettering airfield, and that's where we stayed. We were in tents, lived in tents, and that's where we got more practice before we want to get used to the plane that we had. And our crew stuck together through the whole process. And I remember the first flight we came back, they wanted to interview us to see if there's anything that was interesting. And they gave me a little glass of cognac when you landed. And I never drank that stuff because the coupons they gave us was beer coupons and candy and gum. And the beer I would change for the candy and the gum. And as soon as they gave me a little shot of that cognac, it hit me so quick when I turned around, I walked right into the wall. My buddy grabbed me and he says, and he's laughing like, then they asked us questions like, and I wasn't up to the questions at the time because I never drank before.
So I remember I remember you telling me a lot about how your plane especially was painted all black, and
there was no insignias on it at all, and everything was painted black. Even we weren't supposed to bring any insignias or any kind of information because all the Germans had to do is find out something, and they would have propaganda real quick, like we got these people. And I know if we ever had an accident, we had a crash, they gave us like a rubber map in case we landed in water, and they gave us little compasses, so if we landed anywhere that we wouldn't be going in circles, because you wanted to hit someplace, and they never told us where to go, but they must have told the pilots and whoever was had the bars, like, you know. So,
So why was your plane? I mean, I know, but why was your plane painted black? Like, what kind of missions did you fly?
the missions were to drop supplies to the underground. It was called the Carpetbaggers. That when I remember one time sitting on a runway ready to take off, that our engines were running, and all of a sudden where we were sitting, because we were never allowed to go to our positions till we got in the air. My back was towards the back of the bomb bays, and everything was filled up with equipment to drop to the underground. And all of a sudden, the engine stopped, and it was like kind of scrubbed. They must have found out that the Germans knew that we were coming. But when we did take off, we were sitting like before we got to our places, and I had to watch that I didn't move my turret, because if I turned it a little bit, it was sticking out beyond the fuselage, and that would change the course of the plane. And the captain, I knew that because he hollered at me one time when we were practicing, that what I did, where they were going, I was changing the course, like. And so I had understood. Only time I was supposed to use it is if we were attacked or anything. But we didn't have no GPS then, okay? Our navigator had to use one of those sextants that used on boats, because to find the stars. And if it was cloudy, we had to go above the clouds so he can see the stars and the moon, whatever was at. And then as soon as he found out where we were close, then we had to go down under 10,000 to drop the supplies, because we couldn't do it that high. And at 20,000 feet is like 25, 30 degrees below zero. And I know the uniform I had to wear, like gloves, I had to use a silk pair, then a cotton pair, then a great big leather with that there sheepskin inside. But you had to take them off to use the trigger if you needed. That's why we wore the silk gloves. Because sitting there for hours and hours, you can like freeze when you're at 20,000 below zero. 20 degrees below zero, not 20,000.
I remember you telling me when I was real little you had like jackets and pants, but they had like electricity in them to keep you.
They came out with electric suits, and they're real thin. You can move real good. Well, you have to plug the boot to the pants to the jacket, and they had gloves that were nice and thin, and you plug it. Well, if the glove didn't work, your hands froze because they were so thin. Same thing with your boot. And one of the boots wasn't, if the connection was okay and it wasn't working, your foot would freeze. So I disagreed. We had a choice of what to wear, and I wore the heavier because I thought that was more safe. So I think I just wore it once or twice, and when one part wasn't working, because it was brand new, something that just came out, and they gave us a shot at it, and cold feet hurt.
Yeah, I've been there before. I've been on movie sets where it's just, like it's been like 0 degrees outside, and dumbing me, I wore just like tennis shoes, and it just
you know how cold it is.
Oh, I couldn't imagine being in the air doing
well,
that.
I like the heavy boots with the wool inside, and if you're staying in steel, you can't move. You're in the turret like for like sundown to sunset to and the morning when it's raising, and you're not doing nothing. You're like sitting there holding your guns, and well, don't have to do that, but you're not doing anything. All you do is watching, and you better not sleep while you're watching. You know, you'll be in trouble.
It'd be a bad idea to fall asleep with
especially with the crew, and I'll be the first one maybe to see somebody, and so I was okay at the time. Everything was fine. I never done that. The only mistake I made was when the oxygen came apart when I was flying, and that's a scary part.
So how long were you in the service? I never got to ask you.
2.5 to 3 years, I think it was. I went in when I was 18. Then when the war was over, we flew back. We were going to go over to Japan to help them out, but they gave us a 30-day pass. When I was at home, that's when they dropped the bomb, and then everything was changed. They just sent us to different places to store all the equipment in different places. And I ended up in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, learning how to use a forklift to store things on shelves like. And that was interesting too. Then when it was my turn to not retire, just to be released, they sent me to Philadelphia, and I had to sit down in one of the booths helping other people to be discharged. Then it was my turn. I knew all about it, so I had everything ready to hand it to them, and then we left, came home. And they asked you if you wanted to enlist again, but I wanted to go home.
So, I remember, I haven't seen your photo album in years.
Okay.
We'll take a look at it in a little bit. But I remember, there's one image that really stuck in my head, and that's the church.
Okay.
Everything else was bombed.
Everything bombed. Only thing was hit, kind of the wood on the roof wasn't there, but the whole church was there, but outside of the roof. And every building and bridges were down, and I still have them in my album.
Now that was the bomber squadron that came in before yours, or
no? This was after the war,
okay.
And that's when the dignitaries went over, took pictures because they didn't need no gunners to go with them, so they left us home. But the insignia that we were supposed to have on our uniforms, I didn't know we had one coming. And your dad showed me on the Google that there was one for us to wear. So evidently, why didn't they give it to us? I don't know. Same thing, I didn't know I was entitled to some medals. I was at a American Legion thing that everybody was getting their shots and getting information about. It was all free stuff. And I seen one booth that they had it for medals, and I didn't know I had any coming, so I signed up for it. And a couple months later, I started getting medals from, I think it was Georgia. I didn't get them all at one time, but I got 6 different medals for the things that I went through. And they never gave it to us when we left. You would think that they had all the information, and because they sent me sheets of paper. No, I had them when I left. All the missions and the time it took, how long I was in the air, and it's all written. It also had paper that told me the missions that were scrubbed, that we weren't allowed to go because somehow the Germans found out that we were coming. And that's when we got scrubbed. People wonder what's the word scrubbed mean, like, you know. They canceled the mission, like. So now I know I have a patch that I had on my arm, and they never gave it to us, but I found it later, years later, when I was out of the service, that we had one. So maybe you could take a picture and show them what it looks like. Yeah, I just showed it to you.
Yeah. Now, a story I found really funny that you might be able to expand more upon was the meals that you had whenever you were overseas.
Yeah, we had, everything was like powdered eggs. We had a lot of powdered milk, and it was nice that we had to go to like a, what do you call it, KP. We did KP too, and that was at daytime, because nighttime we flew in the dark, and just pass the time, because you couldn't sleep all day. They assigned you to different, the meals were not bad. I remember we were getting, it looked like steak and gravy, but it was like when we had our trays, we had to finish whatever's in there, and it was liver, covered over with some sauce. And everybody's making faces because they didn't expect it to look like it was steak. And so I learned to eat liver. So.
How many missions did you fly whenever you were?
We scrubbed, I think, 3, and I think I had 4 missions. And it wasn't day after day because a lot of times it was dangerous to take off at that time. My group, before I got there, they're the ones that bombed. The Germans were making hard water for the atomic bomb. And the group I had was a bomb group. But most of them I understood, from what I had information, that most of them didn't come back because it was well fortified. And they helped delay that bomb that they were making. And that's where they changed to what we were doing, changed it to carpetbagging. I understand that that the English were doing it, and I guess they switched it over to us. I don't know how many bombers we had to do that. There wasn't many because they just trained so many for these missions, and I was one that was picked. So, and I didn't know what it was because they never tell us anything. We knew we were doing everything in the dark because there was night missions. We didn't put 2 and 2 together to figure that out.
Yeah, I was reading about your bomber group, and it's the most heavily lost bomber group of World War II. So it actually got combined with another bomber group. So that must have been right before.
That's where we had two numbers on there, and but there was only a few black planes where I knew where we were, and so I don't think there was many that did what we did.
Did your plane fly solo, or did you have any other with you?
No, no escorts, all by ourselves. Like I said, we took off when the sun was going down, and we were coming back when the sun was coming up, and we were by ourselves. And the only way to get there, you know how big those countries are. Mm-hmm. Like I said, you don't have no GPS. The navigator knew all about that sextant stuff. Like I said, if it was cloudy, we had to go above to see the sky to help him find out our direction. But most of our drops were like under 10,000 feet. So all I seen was parachutes opening up. And I remember one time where it was supposed to be pretty dangerous, that the plane was actually turning around on the side, and I thought everything was coming out the windows, because that's what the side gunners would do. They had a lot of small stuff that they threw out, but the Bombays had the big stuff to send out. And he was in a hurry to get back, so he must have knew something, that was a dangerous plot. Somebody must have told him that get in and get out.
You were in a B-24, right?
Right.
Did your pilot name your plane at all? I know he couldn't paint it on there, but did he name it? Or?
I think it was the co-pilot and the navigator came up with it, and they did the painting. Then I looked at where I was. They printed the name over my turret, Little Joe, like, and you can see it if you look at that picture. And where they came up with the name Darky's Dream Doll, I don't know. I wouldn't have picked it.
Darky's Dream Doll, I like it. Just trying to think of more questions.
And that wasn't through the war, that was after the war, because we weren't supposed to give any information to the Germans if something happened to us, like we shot down or we had plane trouble, mechanic trouble. And if we had that, give them less information as you could. They instructed us, like, don't carry any pictures or anything with you. All we had was our dog tags. So evidently we didn't know that was dangerous stuff. By ourselves in unfamiliar territory, and they had the Germans occupying the whole countries, like, so we didn't know where they were stationed, and they had to find out before we dropped the supplies to the underground. Like we dropped supplies of like spies and ammunition, motorcycles, skis, whatever they asked for. Everything was in bundles. Because if you look at that parachute on the picture, if you see it underneath, it looks like it's a package. It's not a person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I can show you. See, if you look at the parachute, that's upside down. You can see where it looks like a package instead of a person.
That's really cool. 801st, 492nd. Special operations.
And we didn't know we had this insignia because I thought they'd give it to us, put it on a shirt. But I was discharged and still didn't know nothing about it. Same thing I didn't know about the medals.
So how many years later did that?
It took 50 years. I found out that when I signed up at that meeting at Veterans Foreign Wars, that I had something coming. Then when they started coming, I said, oh, why didn't they give it to us when we were leaving? They gave us a little pin, and it looked like a little duck, and they named it the Ruptured Duck. A lot of people said, this is thanks for our service. And best part, you can't use it now because it's one piece, and if you have a lapel with a slice in it, you can put it in. But the other ones kind of have a pin in the back where you can jag it in and put it on. And you can't wear it because the suits you have now, jackets, a lot of suits don't have those.
Do you still have your pin?
Yeah, I'll show it to you. It's in here. Matter of fact, I have two. One guy that wanted, they nicknamed it the Ruptured Duck.
So now what about your experience like in England? How was that? I remember you said you would give little kids like your gum.
Little kids were walking around, they would say gum chum. They would say gum chum. I didn't understand it until someone explained to me they wanted gum, chewing gum. And we didn't know, and they said, better watch, you get every kid that walks past you, we're going to tell you that, you know. And then when you start giving it away, you don't have any, and they still getting it. Another kid, we were walking around in London, like, and I'm all hot because I didn't realize everybody's looking for it. The kids liked it. So that's the only ones I asked. And a very, very nice countryside. I like their trains. When we went to where we were stationed, going to London, it was different than ours, you know. Ours is when we went from town to town, different courses to different bases. We had the trains that had ones that had a fire up with coal, and that smoke would come over top of your plane, where you're sitting, and it would go inside, and not knowing you're smelling it, and you're also getting dirty, because that smoke was black. And not realizing, I know I had a brother, he lived in Kentucky, and when he brought the kids up, and they were surprised that they had to wash the kids every hour, because down in Kentucky, the weather was more clear, because we lived where the mills were in Pittsburgh, and it's so smoky that we didn't realize it, because we were born with it. Well, now it's different. You can see what they've done. It's all remodeled.
Something that, this is completely left field, but something that I grew up and I've seen footage and I've seen, like, I studied it in school growing up, was the atomic bomb.
Okay.
How was your reaction to that? Like, did you know what it was? And
yeah, when we heard about it, we were all surprised. Same thing when I was in England. I forgot, I should have said. While we were in England, we heard that the Germans were flying planes without propellers. And we didn't know that. It was like rumor, not knowing there were jets, because they were just coming out. Jets were so fast for them, they couldn't control them. That's why they didn't. I don't think they understood the mechanisms of the way they were flying. And we looked at each other when we heard that Germans got planes without propellers. How can a plane fly without propellers? You know, and you know, when we took pictures, they were all black and white. They didn't come out for color for a while. So then they found out later, well, everything's jets now almost. The Army has some with propellers, big transport planes. Like there's a outfit in our airport that if you maybe you've seen them.
Oh, they fly over my house every
Yeah.
day. I see them. They just.
So you know what they're
Yes.
like. They're so heavy and loud.
Yeah.
And parades, you see them every once in a while.
Yeah, Bemmy goes nuts whenever he hears them. He hides
Yeah.
under my bed.
Does
It's really funny.
he? I'll
S-
bet.
But
Anything else?
yeah, I'm actually really interested in the jets. So
We never got to see them.
No, you never got.
No,
to
we just heard about that the Germans had planes that didn't have propellers because we didn't know they were called jets at the time. It was interesting. And just heard it at one time. We weren't there long enough to understand what the procedure was. Then we start making them. And then
Another question I have is, do you remember where you were whenever the war ended?
yeah, I was home. I was on the third day of leave, and at the time, I was walking through. I had my uniform, walking through Oakland, and everybody's calling you come into the bar. And like I said, I wasn't drinking. And I have a picture with my with me with three cousins. It was a Marine, sailor, and a civilian, a 4F. And there were three cousins and me. And we're sitting at the bar with bottles like, mine was ginger ale because I wasn't drinking at the time.
So I have one more question, and then we can look at your thing.
Okay.
Do you remember where you were on Pearl Harbor? Do you remember hearing about Pearl Harbor? Or?
Yeah, I was still at home. I wasn't in the service yet when that happened. That was that happened in what, 42?
41.
41. 41. I thought it was 42. And I got into service at the beginning of 44. And when they had, I was in England when they had the invasion, what was it?
D-Day.
D-Day, yeah. And I was in England at the time when they had the D-Day. That's when they started our missions. So.
Did you do any missions before D-Day? Or
No. No, that's what when we got in England, we were doing a lot of practicing. Then right after that, I guess they got everything moving to get started. And I guess they had most of the Germans trying to prevent that invasion. And where we were going, there wasn't as many Germans up where we were going because I imagine they called them in for help. But I was in England when the D-Day happened. So we were like getting acquainted with our ship and the crew that we had. So to me, 18, 19, well, 18, it was still, what do you call it, teenager, 18, 19, and 20. So my 3 years plus after the war, because they didn't discharge us right away. They got the older people out first, and then the later ones left. That's why I was assigned to that squadron, because most of it was wiped out. That's why they changed format. Instead of bomb group, we were doing it there, carpetbagging. It was interesting. I didn't know what it was at the time, but after so many missions, you can tell we were doing something that was special.